Hey guys, what's up? Today we're going to talk about layering house pianos. We're going to take our MIDI, we're going to layer it into different sounding modules, different piano types, also do a little processing in order to make it fuller, wider, and also while keeping it clean and being able to hear each layer. It's very important. So let's get started. A lot of things we're going to be doing inside the layering, the processing, and a little bit of bussing also. So let's get to it and not waste any time. This is what I would start with Logic's standard piano right out of the box. When I add my MIDI in and I play with my MIDI notes, I'm going to get this. So very housey sounding MIDI. So that's the key thing right away, is making your MIDI and your notes and your chord progression. If you want it housey and happy, make it that way. Don't make dark chords, you know what I mean? So it depends on the genre you're working in and the type of tracks. Keep that in mind. This is what we're going to use today. The first thing I usually do is I want to make a pretty overall well-processed piano to start. Basically my main piano that's going to have a lot of body, kind of a lot of processing, and being the main layer. There's going to be a few different layers here, and to keep in mind as we're layering, if you're adding a lot of different pianos, and this goes for any layering in general for any sounds, if you're adding too many layers in, you can start losing certain sounds. So don't keep stacking stuff if it doesn't need to be layered. Once you get that sound and achieve where it needs to be, you can stop layering. There's no need to keep going, because in the end you'll start losing a lot of warmth, layering, and clarity. So keep that in mind. Just going to duplicate this down. I'm going to open up Kontakt to start with, and I'm going to go down to a favorite piano of mine. Let's load this up, and I'll go down to the bottom. Kontakt has three great ones in here, also the Giant. If you guys are Kontakt users, Native Instruments, I have the Complete 10 Ultimate, so I have a lot of different options in here, but this is a great piano to start with. I'm going to do a pretty hard-edged piano, meaning the keys are really kind of hitting hard. I'm going to go here with the color and bring it up a little bit here. And I'm going to lay off this dynamic range a little bit, and we can get rid of the resonances and all that stuff. And let's give it a little width, the stereo, just a little bit. Now we're going to have to keep in mind mid-side EQing in this session, because especially when I'm layering anything, synths, bass, strings, you name it, I am utilizing mid-side EQing to place certain elements in the spectrum. If everything is sitting as wide as this piano, you won't be able to hear the character from each module. We're doing different piano types. If they're all going to be sitting in the same stereo range, you're going to get clutter. You're going to get a little bit of less clear image stereo-wise, so keep that in mind too. Now the lid I'm going to keep open. You guys can see that we can do different lids as far as being closed. We want it wide open. All right, so that's what I'm going to do for the piano, the module itself. Now let's go to processing and what we can put on as audio effects. First thing I like to do is throw on the Pro Q from FabFilter to start understanding the EQing technique I'm going to do. And I like to cut my lows right off the bat. And I'm going to do several different instances of the Q2. Some people will say, well, why are you doing that? Why don't you just do it all in one? You can do that, but I like visually seeing multiple different EQs, so I can go to one, and one would be like mid-side, one will be just my left, right. I don't like doing it all in one box, since of course Logic lets you just do a bunch of them, as every DAW does, so it's kind of useful to kind of pick apart, doing one EQ and doing another. All right, just a subtle little cuts there. I'm going to open up the OTT, a little bit of upward downward compression. This is a small multi-band compressor that's very useful, that gives a little bit more overall warm roundedness to there, if that's a word. It gives an analog warmth to it. I'm going to go a little bit less on the depth here. And you guys can see just with those simple two processing, see how much more warmth and body that OTT is giving to it. It's bringing out certain frequencies. It's a multi-band compressor, so it's bringing out more frequencies and just giving that overall warmth, especially I feel in the 200 to 500 hertz, which is where we want that overall analog warmth from the piano. I'm going to go to another cue. As I was saying, this one I'm going to fire up for a little bit of mid-side EQing. Now, as we're layering as we go, we'll be going back to this most likely to dial in certain parameters per the other layer. So we'll go down here to mid, and I will select side here. And I'm going to sweep out a little bit of these low frequencies and make sure those are in mono. Anything over here will be in mono. I don't want too much of this piano sitting center. I want this being a little wider. Let's give a little more mid warmth here. So you guys can hear those harmonics coming out in the mid range. It's cool to do this type of stuff on pianos, especially these are sampled pianos, right? So we have to remember these are basically waveforms inside these samplers, and we're gonna bring out those harmonics of that pianist who played this and who sampled it. So those mid range, you can really bring out character. All right, let's go to our next one. I'm going to give, speaking of harmonics, I'm going to open up a twin tube. This is from Plugin Alliance, and it's down here, SPL. This opens up a little bit of saturation and harmonics to give a touch more volume. It'll give a little more overall output, so I'm going to bring this down about 2 dB, and I'll crank up the harmonics and the saturation. You'll see how it's going to just become a little fuller. You can see if I go too far with that harmonics, we're getting our output kind of overdriven. That's kind of as far as I want to go. In the AB, very subtle detail, but goes a long way in creating a different sounding piano, you know, a little bit well processed, a little different. So that's what I'm going to do for the processing on the first one. I'm just going to turn that down a little bit. I'm going to duplicate down as you guys saw, and I am going to just copy this down. I'm going to go to my EXS sampler from Logic, and I'm going to use a Steinway piano. What I want to point out with layering pianos and processing, each one is a different module, so they bring out different character. Again, make sure when you're layering them, there's a purpose. If my Steinway is going to be hidden when I'm muting it on and off and you're not hearing a difference, there's no reason to have it inside the song. It's got to be making a difference when you mute it on and off. And I'm going to copy over this Q2, and I'm going to adjust that a little bit now for this sound. Okay, let's now copy this over our mid-side function, and I am going to do a little bit differently on this piano. Again, as I said earlier, I don't want them clashing. They don't all need to sit in the same stereo spectrum. Sure, that's going to make them a little bit fuller because we are stacking and stacking, but you got to remember that you have to keep creating space left and right or in the middle. There's all these other elements that are going to be going on in your song. If you're smashing everything into the stereo field without doing mid-side, you're going to get a little bit of clutter. See how it's very left and right with it off? And now I'm taking my high frequencies and pushing the mid out of them, if you can listen to it solo. Listen to this frequency. And that's dead in the center, so we're getting that value in the middle of the speakers, which is again adding harmonics and character. Now I will say, outside of processing and all the modules we're doing and all that cool stuff, remember your mix down. This is also important too with your levels. The best way to mix in pianos, aside from trial and error, if you're new to it, literally just dial stuff in, take a few hours, do a little bit of trial and error. But what I usually do is put one piano completely at 0, and I'm bringing it up slowly until it gives that kind of happy medium. You got to find that thin line of, okay, now it added value to piano 1. That's how you can start mixing it in. You'll start to understand where it's supposed to sit. So as I was saying, when I solo one off, or, in other words, mute it, it should be making a difference. If I'm not hearing much difference when I'm taking this off, there's no reason to have the layer. So in my eyes, huge difference. Let's just put the OTT on there also. Let's do a slight compression on this one. I don't need as much depth as I had on the other one. Just a little bit less there. And that's it for the processing. You can see the huge difference. I'm going to go to my third layer, which is going to be more of a high-end layer. So when you guys are stacking these pianos, you notice I'm copying the MIDI down. This next layer has to be higher in octaves. So let's go up a full octave. And when you go up a full octave, I would say 9 out of 10 times, you're going to want to turn that layer lower in the mix. Our high-end notes can really get harsh on the ears. The resonance can be tough to follow up with. So keep in mind, you want that layer a little lower in volume. Let's go to our sampler. And for anyone that has the Korg sample, it's great to use the M1. There's modules out there as plugins. I have a sample in here from the M1 that I want to use as a main layer. So watch how different this sounds compared to these. Very character. So I'm going to use that as my top layer. Some of you guys might be saying, why aren't you using Nexus? I hope you're not saying that, because it's obvious. Hopefully it's obvious why I'm not using Nexus. It's overused, It's a great plugin, don't get me wrong. I've used it in the past, I've checked it out, but I'm not a huge user of it. It's just in too many people's computers, So for me as a sound designer, producer, I want to use as many different plugins as possible that others are not really using. That'll make you start developing your own sound. If you guys are, big Nexus users, try to break out of that and try to different modules that other people are not using. So again, I'm going to roll this off. This is going to be pretty much my mono layer. I'm going to take out the low end here. And you can feel it's pretty center, but I'm going to sweep this. Yeah, it's sitting dead center in the middle. Now, why I would do that is when my song is heard in mono, we're still going to feel piano. There's going to be a piano layer in mono. So it's not like the piano body will disappear. You might kind of lose some of the wide layers that we had, this piano 1, which has a lot of width. You might lose that a little bit when you go to a mono setting, which is okay, because piano 3 will be heard loud and clear. So listen to that top end. See how we're getting that character from that piano? Super key to have, because again, the mono setting. Now with what I'm talking about in mono, if I just fire this up on our master channel for right now, just an imager to check our mono, you'll just go back and forth from this button. And you can hear a touch of phasing going on. That's because pianos are sitting in the same frequency that I was talking about. One has to be cut pretty far, so I need to cut this further. It's clashing with one of the pianos, so we have to pay attention to that sound. It's definitely getting that phasing sound, and sounds are colliding in the same frequency. You guys can see I took that out now pretty much. It was in the mid frequencies. So that works for us, because anyways, I wanted that high piano 3, to be our high end. So I'm hiking up those frequencies back here and really lowering the mids. We don't need the mids because we already have a bunch of mid range from these two pianos. Okay, last thing I'm gonna do, those are 3 pianos that are sounding great together. I'm gonna bust these together over to aux 1, and I'm gonna put a channel strip from SSL on here to give it a little bit more overall output and character. I'm gonna go to UAD and SSL East channel strip. And this is gonna give a little more character to the overall sound. Turn on the EQ down here in the low. Let's bring this up a little bit. Let's go for 100. It's obviously getting louder. Let's bring that bus down. Slight compression coming through. I mean the tiniest bit, nothing overboard there. You don't want to overdo it. Okay, let's check without that. See how that feels unified, you know, compressed, glued? That's a key factor to layering pianos, you know, layering in general, synths too. You know, this is something I use on a lot of my bus chains, is going through a channel strip. Now, Waves has it too, guys. If you're not a UID user, don't, you know, bang your head over it. It is expensive stuff. It adds up. It's some of the best gear available. I live by it, but if you don't have it, there's ways around doing this channel compression. Just try to make sure you're using a compressor on the bus to glue these 3 layers together so they all make sense. You know, in the end, they're going to sound as one, aside from all the individual we just did. See how dull that feels? That was the A to B difference. It's when you're starting with your piano, you might not notice how dull they are. And I'm not going to tell you every piano module. I don't mean they're dull. I'm saying there's space, and there's got to be an effort to take them to the next level with processing, layering, and bussing like we're doing. Within this 20 minutes, it was not over the top stuff. It was simple stuff that goes a long way, the detail work. All right, guys, that's it for today. That's layering house pianos. Take these techniques to another level. Work with these ideas with your synths too, or maybe you have some cellos. You can apply some similar rules here to those also, you know, give or take on adjusting parameters. You also can apply those to that type of stuff. So give that a shot. I'm pretty much confident this is going to help you out with your house pianos. It's helped me over the years to just bring them from a little bit empty and bland to fuller. And you guys can see that's just 3 layers. You can go a little further if you want to 4 and 5 layers. Again, be careful with your stacking. You don't always have to go that far. But definitely check it out. As always, let us know if you have any questions. We'll catch you guys next time.